Heroes and villains fall into the timeless classic theme of good versus evil. What better anime to look at than at My Hero Academia that focuses on the dynamic between heroes and villains for our example, and I'll cover tips that will help you make an engaging hero versus villain story of your very own. Themes in My Hero Academia zone in on what it truly means to be a hero, which doesn't mean you have to be the strongest. At the core, true heroism is not having any strength or power and still rushing in to save someone, inspiring the concept that anyone can accomplish heroic deeds for the sake of helping others, that even a little deed can save someone's life, that anyone can be a hero. This is a concept that's even shaken a veteran hero like All Might and taken him back to his origins of what it means to be a hero, an impactful reminder after being rooted in the idea that realistically, not anyone can become a hero without powers. The anime further emphasizes heroism by delving into the amount of consideration and care when it comes to saving those in trouble, which in contrast is something that isn't often touched on in the lives of heroes in Western graphic novels, unless it's significant for a character arc or growth. We see the students get trained on how a hero should approach a civilian caught in the crossfires of a villain's attack, to evaluate their surroundings and keep a level head, to gauge what is the least traumatic path or easiest way to get the civilians to safety, and also to practice having a cheery and optimistic demeanor to help out the civilians and put them at ease in dangerous situations, all while having to juggle the enemy and their attacks. The significance of people's lives being in these heroes' hands really hits home when we see how much this is stressed during their training, which also helps us realize how easy the veteran heroes make this seem. Yet this is all effort that becomes second nature due to their years of experience in the field. It's fair to say that certain characters will never have this textbook way of rescuing those in need, but it's certainly encouraged by the Academy, being the golden standard for what heroes in training should strive for. Yet, rescuing people is not the only thing a hero needs to worry about. Being quick to respond to a crisis is crucial, since the faster they are able to arrive at the scene, the faster they can resolve the terror of the villain. And while the students train with the top heroes, they learn that it's not so easy, not only with the level of speed which they have to keep up, but how often they have to keep up the pace, since crime doesn't sleep. Yet the flame of a hero can't burn forever, and even they eventually need to rest. But here's the thing, it's no longer simply about defeating the bad guys.
To bring happiness to the world!
The layers of ideals become so stacked that even we don't know what it means to be a hero until we see the students begin their journey at UA High. And the more we learn, the complexity paints a picture of just how challenging it is to be a hero. It's the concept not so much as saving the world, but saving the people in it, that makes the story feel more personalized and not as detached. But it's these aspects that set it apart from your average hero versus villain tale. Which begs the question, if heroes are always looking out for everyone, who looks out for the heroes? The mortality of the heroes is a morbid image that subconsciously nags at the back of your mind. Quirks allow heroes to use powers, but doesn't mean they get to live forever because of it. A true hero doesn't spring up overnight. And yet a hero with enough power to scare away villains by name alone is few and far between. While dependable heroes seemingly are dwindling on the horizon, it's no wonder people are feeling anxious about what's to come. Unlike most heroes in Western comics, which seem immortal and have unusually long lives, we see the number one hero shrink into a version of himself that is less than what would be described as the symbol of peace because of a terrible injury. The emphasis on mortality, where pro-heroes are forced into dangerous situations for the sake of peace, as villains become more active, increase tension. Yet hints at a notion that these pro-heroes we know won't be around forever, and our heroes in training will have to one day take up the mantle in the endless struggle for peace. And so we come to our villains. After learning about All for One and how its power works by passing down the cumulative power of predecessors to be honed and utilized for the sake of all that is good and those in need. Discovering the existence of One for All shatters those ideals and sends a bone-chilling shudder down your spine while imagining the possibility of having a power that takes from all for oneself, a perfect counterpart to a perfect hero like All Might, which has garnered a reputation of being a symbol of hope and peace. While some may be reluctant to admit, this brings a glint of curiosity to our eyes. You can't deny that a great villain is what adds flair to a story. People want to know what makes them tick and how they become so damaged, and what drove them over the edge for them to want to see the world burn. This is how our heroes are born. In order to combat the villains, our heroes will have to rise to the challenge to stop the chaos and discord for the sake of justice. But without any evil, there will be no need for anyone to bring peace, and no need for anyone to be a hero. Villains are the source of chaos in the world, and the very goal that heroes work towards in order to defeat. Without the villain, what will your hero be? For the villain will become the force that defines the hero. With all that said, what can we take away from this? It's important to develop strong characters, so consider your characters' motivations, their goals, and flaws. You want to make your hero likable so that there's someone your audience can root for. And while you develop your characters, think about how they grow throughout the story, what challenges they face, and what lessons do they learn, or what difficult decisions do they have to make. Simply becoming a hero also adds to the challenge, like we see with the students as they develop their skills and find ways to push their limits and discover what they're capable of. Knowing the sacrifices a hero makes for peace adds depth to your story. What does a hero have to sacrifice when achieving their victory against the villain? In contrast, a villain doesn't necessarily need to represent pure evil. While it's common in these types of stories, a complex villain that operates beyond the acts of mindless evil doings becomes a villain that is more relatable and could conflict your audience's feelings towards them, but also creates a likable villain. Yet the acts of the villains generally create chaos in the story, and these clashes of ideologies have a way of moving the plot forward and keeps your audience gnawing at their nails while dangling off the edge of their seats. Developing your villains could help you establish qualities that define your hero, but this does not mean that your hero and villain have to be the exact opposites of each other. Usually villains and heroes have an entangled fate that we may not always realize from the very beginning. For Deku, by inheriting One for All, he finally gets his wish of obtaining a quirk and gains a better chance of becoming a pro-hero, but also inadvertently inherit the responsibility of defeating All for One, and at first not fully realizing how big the shoes are that he needs to fill. But the history of One for All runs deep, and Deku becomes tied to the villain in more ways than he realizes. Since Yoichi, the brother of All for One, was the first holder of One for All, which All for One seeks to claim since he sees Deku's powers as a threat, as it is the only quirk that is seemingly powerful enough to defeat All for One. Over time, we begin to grasp how personal the conflict is in more ways than the villain simply being evil. One for All and All for One, the give or the passing down of the powers for the sake of peace and hope of One for All, and the take aspect of All for One makes a lasting impression. While a clever play on words, the names of these quirks revolve around each other, reminding us not only of the opposites in which these quirks work, but also tying back to the theme of good versus evil, and how opposing the ideals are for these entities, and how these two major powers are intertwined and destined to clash. It's important to add that the literal power struggle between the hero and villain should have some form of balance, with the hero usually being placed at odds to heighten the suspense or build up to the eventual final battle. We know how Deku holds the powerful one for all quirk, but he's at a major disadvantage because he does not have full control over the abilities, and his body still needs to be strengthened to properly utilize them, making it unclear if Deku could ultimately defeat All For One. Seeing a villain's perspective can add an insight for your audience to see another side of the picture and understand why the villain fights for their ideals. End your chapter or season on a cliffhanger. Leave your audience with questions unanswered or hints at a future conflicts. This encourages your audience to anticipate the next installment or chapter and keep the story alive in their imaginations. In reality, I think that heroes would be more like heroes from The Boys, having big egos and abusing their power to get what they want. The works, right? So I can really appreciate an anime that tries to take a somewhat realistic approach without having to butcher the integrity of the heroes. But seriously, I'm really looking forward to the day there's an anime about corrupt heroes and a bunch of ordinary dudes that are trying to kill them for whatever reason. But I digress. Stay evil, kiddos.